one of the other open spots if you'd like.
All right, it's 4:30. We'll call the meeting to order for our special budget meeting number 2. I guess the first business is to approve the agenda as presented.
So move.
It is got a motion by Rick,
Second.
second by Bruce. Does anyone have any other questions or comments? Not all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, budget is approved, so we'll get to it. Josh, you want to start with your memo?
Yeah, I can just kind of run through this here. We will have one late addition point to this memo we'll talk about, maybe as like a 4B, I guess we'll add it in there before the end. We did get health insurance stuff back at the late end of last week, so I'll give you guys an update on that. So I guess really, I know it was pretty high level last time, and there was probably a chance to think about it. I just wanted to see before we start jumping into some of the stuff we talked about last time, if anybody had a shot to think about what maybe some goals they potentially have this year going out. I know obviously we certainly talked about trying to flatten the curve, however that works out for next year's budget. But if there's anything else anybody else wants to talk before moving forward on that.
Have any comments on any goals? I mean, obviously the goal is to try to have minimum effect on our property tax rate.
Well, I have a couple of specific items. One, maybe we get into more detail, having gone through again the packet that was given out last, for our last meeting, specifically the aquatic facility and then the park board proposed expenditures for 2026. I do have concerns about both of those.
Okay.
Yeah, so the aquatic center one is what we basically receive from the school district as
Yes.
their projections for the coming year. I know there have been frustrations, at least from some of the city representatives, sometimes on that board in the past. I will say there does seem to be a more concerted effort over the last 6 months to a year to try to say, okay, maybe we will never break even on this, but what can we do to minimize losses as much as possible?
When they said, you said something about them having a problem with our participation.
And I know in the past, when we've had staff members on the board, there seemed like times when we would bring stuff up that the school district wasn't always interested in hearing us. But I know specifically within the agreement it lays out that they basically run the facility and we share in any profits and or losses that come from the facility. It's kind of how the agreement's written. And they didn't seem super, oh, thank you, Kim. They didn't seem super interested in taking input. I will say, since the new superintendent's taken over, that has seemed to have changed, and they have certainly been more open over the last couple of years. I mean, as you know, Rick, you're sitting on the board. Sandy Loxton took over community ed department. They certainly seem more open. And
Thanks, Kim.
at least from a school district side, everyone that was there when this started back in, what, 2017, 2018, is no longer there. So there does seem to be a shift in just thinking of that facility. Yeah, and they seem much more open to suggestions. I mean, you've on the board, you've heard the conversations.
There's a park board member that is, I believe, part of
Correct.
the FAC board, and that person has expressed some concerns that ideas are brought forward and they're met with resistance. And so I think there's that little bit of a hurdle that to get over, because I mean I'm seeing an increase of the dollars that we're spending, and I don't get it. I don't understand why. I know we're never going to make money. We may never break even, but to then sink more money, you know, to a tune of, is it an additional 24%, I believe? Yeah, that's significant. And so something has to break, something has to happen.
Is there not a goal within I thought there was to at least break even. That was a goal. Before COVID, they were very close to that. But, so, I'm not familiar with the mindset at all, but is there not?
Yeah, they were never really close.
Is
They
there
were
ever discussion about, what our financial goal is for that?
And also, yeah, and that's where we're just within the last 6 months between that new board member who also sits, Matt Becca from Park Board, as well as Dan Call now sits on that board. The two of them seem to kind of be spearheading this movement, and I think they're certainly approaching it in different directions, but they seem to have the same goal of what can we do to try to at least reduce losses as much as possible. And they've actually got the board looking at potential marketing ideas to try to drive revenue, or other membership options, or just what they can do internally. Try to weed off some stuff that isn't as popular and bring in stuff that's more popular, is what all of the various options that they certainly are running at this point. So, yeah, those conversations have certainly started within the last few months especially.
Why the increase when, didn't I just read last week's paper that there was some reorganization at the top level that other people were gonna, instead of filling a position, was gonna add?
That didn't really affect that.
The
Aquatic center.
athletic center, yeah,
It
that
just-
was,
yeah, whoever Janelle reports to now is something different than Craig.
She retired.
yeah, Janelle's no longer there, yeah.
No, Janelle, she works at the Janelle Moxa.
Oh, okay, different, yeah,
Yeah.
different
she-
Janelle.
Now she reports to Sandy, before she reported to Craig Most, but I don't think that would affect really that much.
Sandy's not there.
Sandy Lynn is,
Sandy Locke,
Sandy Loxton.
yes, there's different, now there's different Sandys.
different Janelles.
Yeah, yeah. Cause I did talk to Janelle Moxa this morning.
Well,
Yeah.
shouldn't the aquatic center get some of that savings, so if a position is gonna be done, obviously, and then it falls under somebody else's realm a little bit, that
Right.
should free something up on that department.
Yeah,
as well.
because-
Their
yeah.
budget cycle is different than ours.
I understand.
Yeah, yeah, it's a
maybe
different
it'll
fiscal
be
year, but
effective next year.
you're right, cause Craig Most, was over operations, and
I'm sure some of his salary got
we were,
allocated to-
we were, yeah, paying some of that
but we
salary
probably won't see that till
the following,
their next budget cycle, which would be next year for us.
yeah. Next, July.
But that's what we're talking about is next year.
Yeah,
plus.
Well, yeah, but it's, yeah. but
We
I
should
don't
at least
know.
get 6 months, cause they go from June 30th or
Yes.
July through June.
So the explanation I got from them is that they basically are forecasting revenues to hold steady for this coming year, and that increases basically of annual salary benefit increases that they're forecasting out. Now, they said they can certainly break into a much more detailed explanation if we're looking for it, but that's kind of the overarching reason that they're seeing where these current budget numbers are landing.
Well, I don't wanna come across as pessimistic, but I am, and I don't fully trust them when they're scratching for every penny they can scratch. It'd be real easy to somehow not give the city a fair portion or whatever else. I mean, I think we should have some oversight on it and make sure that it is. If they are saying you want more detail, don't you think we should get more detail to find out where exactly this missing person and this is slotting here and slotting there? I don't want it all to go to transportation or health benefits or something, and we're still stuck with a $200,000 bill every year.
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly ask Brian for more detail.
Doesn't the rest of the council agree to?
But like I said,
Am I just being pessimistic and maybe they're just fine with, but I just would like to see, or have somebody, knowing somebody's looking at that to make sure that it's proportionate and it's, the city's getting a fair share. So we're not,
Equal share, yes.
or yeah, equal share, we split it, right?
Well, I haven't looked at the agreement for a long time, but I'll take it for what you said. The school actually means control, financial control, but being on this board or this
Joint powers.
Joint Powers does not, they don't have the authority to operate it, it's the school that operates it.
So within the agreement, it basically says the school operates it.
Okay.
With some, and I can pull up the exact language of the agreement.
I'm trying to find it again where that, I think we have it somewhere, but
We haven't, because I've read it numerous times over the last 3 or 4 years when I've gotten frustrated with them.
it is a challenge then if if the Joint Powers Board does not have the authority to operate it.
Yeah, so
And
yeah,
that's what you're
I know operations happen from the school.
Yeah, we may not be able to do anything with that, but I think there's certainly, we should try to see if we can get that changed, because it's obviously it's not good for the taxpayers in New Prague pay for it and not have any influence over it, in my mind.
I agree with you, Bruce.
But there was some language in there though. And maybe it was just because we were trying to be good partners too. But I thought I know they control and run the day-to-day operations and everything else, but the city still had some sway over that. Whether it's having an equal number of board members that sit on the board, that are really supposed to answer to the council.
Right, I don't know if it's an advisory board like our boards and commissions, you know.
Well, it was when I was on it, when I
Right,
started,
so
when it
it's-
first
I would
opened, I
assume
was
it'd be
on it
that
for
similar
3 years.
Structure where business decisions were made and then,
And Ken, you were on it with me then, I mean, it seemed like we had some say in how we wanna do this. And
They're
what
kind of
it
an
was.
advisory board, and they were supposed to report back, I think, annually. But yeah, I think it was pretty limited on what the language said, but Josh, you're able to find it.
Yeah, I'm looking for it real fast, see if I can find it.
Trying to think, was it recent that we did one?
What item number is that again?
If you easily find it, just send it out to us again, because I just can't find where I put it. And
Sean,
I thought they had to report.
we were
annually.
just looking at goals,
Oh,
and so I had a couple of concerns.
I see, okay, yes, sorry.
I guess one of the goals is to look into this.
Exactly.
So just so I have it right now they're expecting us to put up 173 in, is that correct?
yes.
That's what I saw.
Yeah,
An
that-
increase of like 35,000.
Yeah, so that's,
33, 1.
yeah, but that's their preliminary number at this point.
Well, that's
Okay.
They would have already created their budget for this next.
correct.
Yes, yeah.
And I don't know if they presented that to us yet.
But then,
At one time, they were to present that like in May of each year.
okay, so 20.
Yeah, I don't know how many times that's happened.
Once, I think.
Yeah, they have not presented their budget to the best of my knowledge. It may have been included, it wasn't even included in the park board,
Validation.
packets, which we're all supposed to see.
Yeah, they go June to June, so
Yep.
we're just started.
I think there was one time they presented it when we had to ask for it.
Yes,
Yes, were you on then, Maggie, too?
yes.
Okay.
Who did it, Sandy or something?
Sandy did.
Sandy Lynn. probably
Yeah, I'm
did
just
it.
trying to find the actual copy.
New gal would be the one.
Cause where's yours?
It's a new guy,
Guys.
new finance guy.
Yeah.
Finance
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah, well, let's just question our 173 with all the changes,
Is that for
how did
SRO?
that affect us? Cause 173 is less than it has been, right? I remember years it was over 200, wasn't it, at one point?
It's kind of, what was it last year, 130?
So, okay, so I've got the numbers right in front of me here, so.
140 last year.
Yes. you're right.
Or 153,6, 2024.
So
Going up 20,000.
Yeah, so as you guys mentioned, ours is
Can you just
slightly
share
off of theirs.
Yeah.
and
So
email with that?
this is for what they're calling their fiscal year 25-26 preliminary budget. And they are projecting $173,000 per entity loss at that point. For the 2024-2025 revised budget, they are now projecting 166. So initially when we had budgeted, what was it,
153,6.
153.6, they upped that to 166 in a later revised budget when revenues weren't coming in like they thought they were going
When
to.
was that revised? So our current budget does not reflect the revised number.
Correct. So,
Well, if that's a Google Doc, they could have.
Well, it doesn't, so 2024 was this.
yeah,
2025, I think this was still a projected number.
140.
Yeah, 140,000 and
Now it's
now it's
one
166.
66, but then that 166 grew to 173.
That's crazy.
Who is our rep on the board? Rick in,
so it is Rick, Matt Becca from the Parks Board, and Dwayne. Dwayne said he still wanted to serve on there, but he was not at the last meeting. So I've been trying to get a hold of him to see if he in fact does still want to serve on there.
So, you got a question?
no, I just wanted to know who was on the board and I couldn't recall.
So that is, I think, one of the other frustrations we as a city have had because they revised their budgets a lot. And I suppose it does come with running a business. I mean, even and theoretically, the golf board could, or see reduced revenues and what they expect, and so as they try to make numbers work. And I think that's what they usually do. Some years it comes down in their revised budgets and the loss gets less. Some years it goes up. If you, similar to how we created or started working on a fire department, remember pension fund, we talked about that, Sean, where we put away extra money for that. A couple years ago, Robin and I had started looking at doing that potentially for the aquatic center as well, knowing that there was the potential for some years for us to go over if revenues don't match what the initial projections are a year out from that. So,
Which I think is a prudent thing to do, but, to get to the bottom line is, why are we seeing these increases? I mean, if this is a business, at some point in time, that business is not gonna thrive, and then what do? Do you just keep pouring money into it? So we just need to take a hard look at it. Take a look at the joint powers agreement, see if there's any way we can possibly amend it so that we have more control over the operations, and the money that's being poured into it. And I understand salaries have to go up to get, staff, chemicals, et cetera, but this is just getting to a point where I'm getting very concerned about it. So we know that we've got work to do there. I'm not going to carry on with that one.
and Robin did just email out the agreement.
Okay,
So it should all be
thanks.
in your
Okay.
inboxes.
So the other one is the park board, and I know that I'm the city council rep on the park board. But I will have to say that I have missed a couple of meetings. $110,000 budgeted for this year, something has to give. And I believe there was a city center, what was it? City center master plan for $30,000. I'm not sure what that is supposed to be. I know that we're already making decisions about the stormwater retention pond, and we're hoping for some grant money to finish that piece of it. So I don't think this master plan really needs to be budgeted for 2026 until we figure that out.
So I will say as an update on that front, we did get another quick email from Bolton and Mink. They were in contact with the state and they just wanted a few more items. They were hopeful, because you remember, right, a lot of those improvements, and we're hoping more and more, as Bolton and Mink is now pushing on for us up at the state, can come from some of that EDA money. The state basically is saying, we use this or send it back to us. And so we're hoping a lot of those improvements out there can be taken care of with that small cities development money that the EDA has just been sitting in our pot now for a number of years.
Okay.
And Maggie, to add a little more context to that, so we had put 30,000 in. That was a number we had used before we got the grant from Scott County to pay for the portion of redesign, or to design the pond out there. Kind of kept it in here till we knew Chris Knudsen was getting near the end. He was working on incorporating some of as much as he could, like paving of the parking lot, or the alley, excuse me, some parking areas adjacent on the west side along 3rd Avenue, and then a trail. And that was, he thought, the limit of what we could put under that grant, because it was all stormwater services going into that pond. So his take on it was, well, if I could put it under the grant allotment for the design of the pond, if the park board wants to have, let's say, landscaping and additional trail plans in the future, that would be some fraction of that 30,000. We don't know what that would be, and to Josh's point, hopeful that we can just include that ultimately in the money that we have sitting there from the state to kind of finish building that out. So it's possible we don't need any of it, but we're just kind of keeping it as a placeholder. But certainly we don't need 30,000. I think I mentioned that last Monday as well.
When will that decision be made?
Well, we were hoping to have more information by this week. I think we got, like Josh said, a little update.
We got an email, and I think I gotta go back and read exactly what it said again, but it sounded like she wanted a few more pieces of information, so she could go back to the state and say, see, we can include this in our project.
Okay. All right, well, so let's kind of just earmark that, because, you know, we're trying to get to a preliminary levy next month, and so just
I would
have
just
concerns.
piggyback on that, because I had some comments about that too, and I know I dragged around with this park board last week, and you responded to some of that, but, and from a 30,000 foot level, I'm not sure that we can really develop a benchmark number that we should be spending on the park board. I think back to when Mike was here, we just presented the information a little differently. I remember the back page had the 3 or 4 things the park board were gonna do, and we kind of argued all day about $10,000, and we're deciding things that the park board should or shouldn't do. But it does seem to have taken a dramatic, maybe not dramatic, but a significant change from that $30,000 or $40,000 level to now what we're talking about, 110. So I'm not sure what the appropriate number is, but I think the consideration should be given the fact that the fitness center, we're gonna be spending more money there, particular year. If we're adding a new park board position or a full-time equivalent position, that's part of what we spend on parks and maintenance and things like that. And obviously the wages go up on everyone. So I feel that all that should be considered when we're talking about how much money from the general fund anyway that gets put in the park board kind of designated pot. I don't know what the number should be, but historically, as you said, it's been down to that $20,000 or $40,000 number in the last few years. Last year, I think the budget was
A little over 78,000.
yeah, and I'm not sure why it's divided out into special projects and capital outlay. Is that coming from 2 different fundings?
So capital outlay, well, I guess I'm not sure which page are you looking at in the budget.
I'm looking at the budget page 21. In any event, last year, the total was 78. I don't have the CIP from last year, so I don't know what it showed. I guess that was just.
Yeah, that was all general fund. I don't know, I guess I don't know why it was broke out that way.
But when we're looking at CIP numbers, I'm assuming that all the CIP numbers we see on those sheets are general fund.
I don't know if that's always,
Because you bring up a point that I get confused about, is this being funded sometimes from the developer fee pot or general fund, and if it's, are they both on the CIP sometimes? What's that?
So that's what we talked about.
21.
We didn't get it updated for the packet, but that CIP listing showed things that were coming out of the developer pot of money, which
Last
is
year, you mean, or this year?
the budget packet that you still have in your packet, still showing items that are in the CIP coming out of that developer contributed fund.
but that's for future ones, not 2026.
2026 was 110, that was only for the
Okay,
general fund.
okay.
And as we talked, all those items, if they're including newer expanded equipment, could be paid for out of those developer funded pot of money. The park board's idea and why we've always had the general fund park board budget was to not put it all in the backs of those developer projects because there's limited funds in there. And they have big projects down the road
Right.
that could include a splash pad, could include, you know, bike park, could include, ball field, complex, you know, those types of things.
I have a different comment about that, but.
Yeah, that's a whole nother discussion down the road, but.
I guess the nut and bolts of it is, I don't know what the right numbers are, but I would like to see something less than 110,000. Just because we seem to be gravitating, and rightfully or whatever, from a 40,000 some odd number in my mind to now 110. If we want to try to establish what benchmark should be, I think I'm all for that. There's certainly an amount of money that from the general fund I think merits a regular contribution for park board discretionary spending kind of thing.
Yeah,
I'm
that's,
not sure 110 is the number. I'm comfortable with this year though. That's
yeah, I'd relayed that to the park board. I said, I don't believe the council's gonna give you that much more than the 78 from last year. And then we'd have to look back and where that's been trending. Like you said,
well, I
early
appreciate,
in my tenure here, it was 20,000 a year for a number of years, and it's trended upwards from there.
appreciate you saying that, but you're putting us through all this excruciating conversation to get at 78,000. But the other comment about splash pads and all of that, I'm all for that. I'm totally support it, but how it gets funded is the big question, where it comes from. So when I look at CIP and I see these big numbers, I'm thinking, my understanding, the council is approving these projects when we approve the CIP. And so we've had, when you put in splash pads in these big $500,000 numbers or whatever, what is that supposed to mean to us as a council? Are we saying
Those
we
were never
support
intended
it?
to be on that listing. That was
Okay.
an error.
Okay,
Oh, the splash pad?
Yeah, for like, yes, approved, done, that was just a
Oh, no, yeah.
future project list for the park board. That was never intended to be on that CIP.
well, I totally
Okay.
support the idea that that is put somewhere.
Yep.
But it's confusing me that we're taking action on it and then next year actually money gets spent on it or whenever. But my understanding is once we approve the CIP, the things on the 2026, the council's actually approving those items.
Yeah, so yeah, that would be my thought of, once we approve the CIP in December, anything that's in that 26 column is yes, we are looking at doing that for 26. 27 and beyond is obviously the farther you go out, the more fluid it becomes.
And the splash pad, to your point, should come off because in the visioning document, that splash pad has to have a group of citizens to form a 501(c), I think it, you know, nonprofit, to move forward with
I'll say,
any
yeah,
such
looking back at
project.
that visioning, that was the very last thing that somebody did, and if I remember right, that was updated like a year ago, and that's kind of died unless you've heard something else
Yeah.
about it.
No, it has died, you know, so again, it's, you know, it's on that visioning document and we want a group of citizens similar to the dog park, then I think we can move forward that way, but I don't know how when does the survey close for the park?
Closed on Friday.
On Friday, okay. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of
So-
comments we get.
Forget who asked the question, Bruce, why it was capital versus
Yeah.
the special project. So it was a grant match that we used. I think it was old ARPA dollars for the, well, redesignated
For the
APR.
special projects?
Yes.
So then last year, we only spent $43,000 of the general fund. This report.
Yeah, that would be fair.
And this is 110, so that's a significant increase.
Or capital outlay, sorry, was the 43,126, that was the grant match. So really 35.
43 was the grant? So
35 was actually the general fund.
What's the appropriate number to have in for general fund, do you feel?
I don't know what that number is. All I can tell you is from the park board's recommendation, they're trying to maximize their money that they have in the funds for bigger projects later. That's why it's kind of crept up over the years. I'm not saying I agree with that. I'm just passing along their recommendation as it moves forward from their budgeting discussions.
Well, as a city staff member, what is your opinion?
I would say some of these items on here can be dropped down, over to the capital, so 35, 40 would probably be appropriate.
Yeah, I guess I'm not even asking particular issues or items, kinda like, what is your feel for what the amount should come out of the general fund every year for park board?
You know,
Discretionary.
I can't
funds.
answer for the park board.
I guess my thought is, I mean, we've historically spent, like you said, that 40 to 50,000, and there's been the years where we've had extra money that we've been able to put in. I mean, if we were to look at that, staying at that 40 to 50,000, I don't know if that's necessarily unreasonable. As you mentioned last time, I kind of wanted to bring these forward so you could see them. I know when I first started, a number of stuff came forward, and you guys said, why is this so important? We've never seen this before. Well, it sounds like my predecessor had lopped stuff off, so you weren't even seeing it by the time it got to you. So I was trying.
I totally get that, but then if things just go through, we would have approved $110,000 without anybody questioning it. If it's up to us to catch it, you know what I mean?
And I don't know if it's necessarily up to you guys to catch it. I mean, but I think that's part of the review of, you know, these are the things that are on our list. And short of us going down every single line item with every single piece of equipment and saying we're looking at putting this in there, that when we get to the CIP portion, I mean, we're kind of looking at the various items that would get reviewed on the CIP, including the park project.
Park board's a tricky one. I think the question always comes up, is it a need or a want?
Right.
Anybody could make the argument that nothing park related is a need. Well, that's unfortunate because then, you know, the quality of life is kind of thrown out of the picture in that equation. So I guess it comes back to the council on what do you value for improving quality of the park system and making those continual improvements, not just on the back of developers, but on the back of, somewhat on the back of the general taxpayers for general improvement.
I don't disagree with any of that, but sometimes I think we forget consideration for all the other things that are happening. City council determined to get the city center as part of our future park space, so that's an addition as well, and there's cost in that.
Yep.
So there's investments being made there as well. So that gets put in here too, but you don't see it in the budget, but that's part of the future. So I think things are happening. When we spend 35,000 and 110,000 is the number in the budget, I think that should be called out in your narrative, or at least that's a significant change. And if we don't question it, then it happens. So that's my criticism of it. If you're expecting that we're gonna look through every 1/2 ton truck and say, is this worth it or not, and type of thing, it's nice to know when you do the CIP, if there are changes from the previous year to note it. I think as Sean's comment last week, if I don't have to go back to last year's and compare it, that would be nice. You know, if you put footnotes underneath it, say this 1/2 ton truck, we're gonna try to get by another year or whatever, put footnotes down there.
I mean, it does say 214% increase right on page 20 of your budget,
For a park?
park board.
Okay, I missed it then. Where's that?
It was a page you pointed out earlier, page 20.
I have to look stupid again. What am I looking for?
Right there on the park board, it says 110
It's
proposed.
under parks, not under,
Here?
The department's actually on the
On
bottom.
page 21, yeah.
Right,
special projects.
right.
But to your point, I could have included on that overview sheet under the capital and special
And that's
projects.
exactly what I'm saying, it went up that much. But it wasn't called out or described or discussed what the big change is, that's a material change. I do have that circled, and it's. So, I mean, that's where you can get into a discussion whether these are really needed, or it's unusual circumstances, but it's a material change when it's 200-some%.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate, I don't make that vote, that's park board vote to push that forward to you to review. I can argue all day till I'm blue in the face, they make that recommendation to you, so. I'm not trying to hide anything,
No, I'm not getting at that at all, but it's just helpful for me or us to understand some of the thinking behind some of the numbers and the changes. Well, thanks for wrestling through that with me.
So what are we saying that on the special projects, are we gonna put 35,000 there?
I think we need to go back to the park board and let them know that this is not acceptable and they have to make a decision.
So I do wonder along those lines if you guys have a number that you think would be more acceptable, like we are willing to put in 50. We'll just use that as the middle number, and say park board. What would you like to do with that 50?
So, the projects the park board has is the city center master plan for 30,000, which I know you already addressed. Concrete in the hockey rink for pickleball and hockey, that's 40,000. Memorial Park entrance sign replacement at 5,000, and that's not an electronic sign to the best of my knowledge.
Correct.
And then a sprinkler system for Memorial softball fields at 35,000. So I think, honestly, I think the park board needs to address these items and take money off the table, right, for this year.
And I think for them, it would be a decision of moving it over to the park equipment fund, where they do have 250,000 in that pot of fund available for that.
So the equipment fund could cover the sprinklers,
Definitely.
okay, and the sign, if that's,
Well, not the sign, that's a replacement we can't use.
oh, okay, you're right.
Only for new expanded amenities can we use the,
Okay, so take 35,000 off 110, something still has to give.
Well, then the 30, you're saying,
For the city center master plan,
yeah.
that's my opinion.
That's what, I mean.
Yeah.
That's something that was addressed earlier.
Go along those lines, getting to that, what was that, 35 gets you down to 75, is closer to the spending match last year. Now granted, their revenue source is a little bit different last year, but just playing devil's advocate on that, it is matching the spending, or I guess would call it 24. 25, budget for 25, it closer matches that spending.
Yeah, so if it's just the concrete and the Memorial Park entrance, that's 45,000. Get rid of the city center master plan. Just my suggestion, but the park board needs to make that decision. So that gets us a little closer to our original number a couple of years ago,
What does that number come to then?
45,000.
45.
So those are the only items that I had as far as talking about goals, is to
Look into those two things.
look at those two things, yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else?
Not in that area for me anyway.
Okay, moving on to the next one, and we'd kind of had a brief discussion about wage and salary, and I know you guys had mentioned that 4% felt like it was a little high. I guess at this point, not knowing where the compensation study is gonna land, and what could potentially come out of that, I guess I would still caution as to just keeping the 4% in there for now. Knowing that it's a preliminary levy and things can always come down, but if for some reason we go down now, then you lose out on the potential flexibility 2 or 3 months from now when you're making that decision. I certainly understand. I just hate to hamstring us and get our preliminary not to exceed levy super low and then something comes up. If we do it now versus doing it in October or November.
Where are you at with that right now?
What do you mean?
What's the percentage rate for that?
The percentage rate, percentage rate, in the budget right now, I think is, frog's hair under 7%. And I mean, we'll get to this in a little bit, I would recommend a little bit higher than that, just for preliminary sake, but, that again is that would be setting the preliminary, not necessarily the final. And in years past, usually we've gone a little bit higher than the budget on the preliminary, just so we have that flexibility, and then I think every single year we've come down from that. I know you'd asked the question, what does a 1% change in COLA do to the levy? And we determined it was roughly $20,000.
Right.
Which
I
would
think
be
the
about,
labor alone was 12,000 something, but then benefits.
yeah, it was like 16 or 17 with labor, and then benefits bumped you up to 20. Or 1% is about a 0.4 or 0.4% change in that.
So if we took, what did we say on the park board, 45?
Yes,
So
versus 110.
Right, so that's 65, 1% is 53%.
53,000, yeah.
53,000, so it's like 1.22%. So we lower the levy just with that down to 5 point something.
No. Yeah,
Isn't it
yeah, you'd be right around 5.7.
Yeah.
And that would be with leaving COLA and everything the way it's written?
Yes. Again,
I would just caution, I would make a lot of preliminary cuts now, instead of final cuts.
right, my thing is, I mean, you can even set the levy at 6.98%, knowing that you got plenty of room to reduce it. The only thing about that is the shock is people are gonna see that when they get their statement, because that's what gets published, even though we know that it's not gonna be 6.98%. After we get done, it could be 5%, like many years said, you and I.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, so, you know, I get, you know, and I agree with the philosophy that let's not get the tight budget done, you know, for that September number that we have to give the Minnesota Department of Revenue. You know, so getting to that thing is to me is just like, that's just can't be exceed that.
Right, no, and I agree with your theory, but when we were talking about goals, I just wanted to
Right.
highlight these two items that they're kind of red flags to me.
Right, we could say the goal is 5%.
Right.
And, you know, right there, we're 0.5% away from that just with the park board thing, you know, so that, and they're sure there's probably other things in there that, you know, correct or something too. But yet it bases a lot of it on that comp study, you know, how that gets addressed in the budget. Because if we're only putting 4%, and I don't know what the comp study is gonna come in. What if it comes in at 7%? Well, obviously, we don't have to do the whole 7%, but maybe we may wanna do it over 2 years.
I'm not sure if these comments really kind of go back to the gold question of it, but when I look at the numbers and kind of look at, I'm not one that has this striving mentality. You gotta get it down to as low as possible. I'm trying to look at comparative to other communities and where should our community be as far as a tax rate. So I tend to look at that a lot. And to answer your previous question, if you're not getting a clear answer, I would like to see us try to do things that would help alleviate a spike in the next 2 years when the police station bonding comes on board. So I'm on that camp, that if we can do things, that would be a reason why I would accept a higher levy than we would normally have. So if there's things that we save money on, I would be supportive of that part of it. So I would be supportive if we had this kind of a rate, if some of the money is going towards specifically to alleviate or reduce the spike that's gonna occur. If we're not doing that though, then I think my happy number is a little lower, to try to match more of an average inflation rate, or closer to what our tax rate last year was, 44.48. This is coming at 45.8. Your comment about the levy percentage, even at this number that we have here, it's only increasing the city tax rate. I shouldn't use the word only because that's, I'm gonna get killed for saying that, but the tax rate goes up from 44.4 to 45.8. It is certainly a significant number, but when you look at your tax, if that's just your preliminary, that's not gonna raise the roof as much as next time when we have a spike that comes into play. So I'm not as concerned about having a preliminary levy that gives us a lot of flexibility. Because we've always, at least since I've been here, we've always done it. It's always been much higher than we expected to end up.
Right.
I'm not as concerned about that part of it, but throwing those comments in the mix.
So what would, so
So,
what, to your goal, what is your number then, if you wanna get it to that tax rate of last year?
It really wouldn't be all that much. I think it's only $27,000 or something. I think to go from 45.8 to 44.4, because not because the LGA went up, it didn't really, but because of our tax base went up, whatever, 500,000. That's where we get the benefit of it.
Right.
We're always going to have people whose house goes up over that $500,000 magic number where their levy gets, what do they call it, their rate increases.
yeah.
We always get the people that have their value of their home jump up. They're going to have significantly higher tax payments to make. But overall, I look at the net tax rate for the city as a proxy, basically. And that's a number that's easy to compare to other cities, other towns, see where we stand.
But that's a rate that people don't understand.
Well, you can calculate it on your property tax.
Well, I know.
You can figure it out.
What they understand is when they look at it and they look compared to last year's, and it goes up $800, or it goes up, and not just the city portion, I'm talking
Their
the whole
total
thing.
bill.
They look at the whole thing, whether Maggie, you wanna just say our portion is only this.
Right.
And we're only responsible for that, I totally agree and admit it, but that's what they look at, and that's what I hear. And they're concerned, I get it all the time from people. I can't believe it. We had the guy from Marquette Jewelers come in here one day after Scott County a number of years ago, and he goes, my business tax just went up 24% or whatever it was. I can't keep doing this. So it is a big aggregate of everything that we have to be aware of. And you can talk about tax capacity and the fact, well, we got a new building and that's gonna come on, well, it won't come online. The apartments certainly won't, but Heartland Bank or whatever, not this year, but next year, the following year. But in the end, going from the 4.48 to 45.81 comes out of people's checking accounts. They see. Because it falls mostly on the homeowner. Their homes are going up 6% anyways. So even if we did nothing and left it the same, they're gonna pay 6%.
Well, no, not necessarily.
Well, not necessarily, but some people will, and others will pay more, but that's the average.
So I guess we'll certainly circle into that as part of the larger conversation, but I guess trying to keep people on track, because I know everyone wants their Monday night. Are there any other necessarily comments on the COLA right now hanging out at 4%?
Well, I just have a quick question on the COLA. So if we're gonna do this compensation study and it's gonna come back and say that we're slotted correctly or maybe behind and they're getting that, why would we offer both? I mean, we're gonna match
And
the
so,
going
yeah,
rate.
yep, so I
So the
think,
COLA could theoretically be zero.
yeah, I think right now, what this is doing is this is just helping us preliminarily budget, not knowing what's coming out. And so this is kind of us just putting placeholder money in. And then obviously, once that comes out, things will adjust left, right, sideways. And so I would guess, I mean, if we end up getting our study back in October and say, okay, we're gonna implement this in like January 1, that essentially is doing, in my mind, no COLA. You are making the compensation salary adjustment for January 1, and because to COLA that is just adding on top of what you're being told would put you where you're supposed to be.
Right.
So then the next adjustment would come a year later, as you're
Right.
now adjusting those new numbers a year.
Okay, I just wanna.
That would be my thought on all of it.
Well, I know in years past, we've done the COLA, and then you add steps in, and then there's 6% increases to certain individuals, and only just the COLA to some others. And I'm still of the belief that cost of living affects everybody the same, whether you're the top 6 or you're the bottom 6. Bread is bread, gas is gas, whatever. I think what we ought to do is just set it, to figure out the percentage based on everybody's salary together, and then award that to everybody as their COLA. And I know you guys would be against it, I would be too, because you guys have opportunity to make a lot more money, and then it just compounds itself on it. So not only does that COLA, and it just, the bigger it goes, as I've used before, the top is going like this, and somewhere in the bottom and middle are going more like this, and it just, that gap is widening because we use a straight percentage. And COLA is COLA, it's cost of living adjustment. Should be everybody gets $2,000, and here it is January 1st, there's your check from last year, or whatever, you know. It's easier to budget, it has more.
So you're saying you don't have steps?
No, I'm talking, I threw in the step thing because there is situations where people not only get steps, and I was thinking, in my mind, I was going back to the linemen where we added different steps to stay competitive.
Oh, what you're saying
But they
is-
were jumping 10%, and maybe the guys in the street department were jumping 4%. But just talking COLA, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have tried to combine the two, but just talking COLA, what I'm saying is 4% to Josh is more than 4% to Matt. 4% to Josh. I think it should be a flat rate or a flat dollar amount, and it's easier for us to budget. We just know, here's the COLA, it's gonna come in at this year, $2,000 a person. But everybody gets it because Josh isn't paying any more than for bread and whatever else. But when you compound it onto a bigger salary, 4%, obviously to Josh is, and I'm not trying to pick on you, Josh, but you're the chief, you're the top guy.
So
Yep.
that makes sense.
But 4% to Josh is a lot more than 4% to one of the billing clerks down there, right? But the cost of living, she's still paying for the same $2.99 for gas and $2 for bread and $3 for eggs. That's what cost of living is. So, you know, Josh gets $5,000 and she gets $1,500. It just doesn't seem. Plus, now we're compounding that on top of Josh's salary, sorry, Josh, but you're compounding that every year, so now the 4% and the 3% is even more. So if you look at a graph with the lowest bottom third people and the top third people, that gap is widening because, not because of compounding, but you get it.
So I think just to play devil's advocate on that, the argument would be, does cost of living only incorporate the basic necessities of life, or does cost of living incorporate how somebody lives their life? And I'm just asking that as just a general argument, like what?
It's totally legit. And
What's the COLA that is adjusting somebody's salary or wage, that they've, we'll say, built their life around this wage or salary, and that's gonna adjust year to year? Well, if, let's say I go to Disney World every single year and the cost of going to Disney World goes up, does that get included in, because I'm using that as a?
The cost of your family going to Disney World is no different than the billing clerk's cost of going to Disney World.
No, fair, but and I'm just using that as an example, like
Right.
generally people who make more money are generally gonna spend more money. And
Right.
so does that spending more money due to their higher position get included in that
Well,
adjustment?
that's where steps come in, that's where compensation studies, so we compare you with some of the other city administrators around here, like-sized communities. And maybe we have to adjust that, maybe we have to do a compensation study maybe every 3 years instead of 5, or whatever, to make sure. If we start losing people like you to Lakeville well, that's probably not a good example,
Yes,
but
yeah.
Waconia,
What does
whatever.
the Social Security Administration base their COLA on? And to the best of my knowledge, that is the cost of goods and services. So it's not vacations. It's not buying a bigger house. It's,
Well, that's-
right, so it's goods and services.
And I think that was more the conversation of how are we measuring a COLA? Because if you're using it based off of the inflation rate, which I know during the last council meeting, the talk was, well, are we using it to try to see what other cities are necessarily doing versus cost of living? Just kind of having that conversation of how do we view that metric? And if we're going to then say, okay, well, maybe the people at the top won't get adjusted quite as much, but we'll have a compensation study to make up for that. Does that mean that if a person is in the middle of the scale, we'll just say 100,000 to 110,000 and they're sitting at 105, and that adjusts up to 110 or 110 to 120, are we gonna keep them in the middle then? Or are we then gonna drop them at the bottom because it's still a $5,000 raise? Because then at that point, you're not really adjusting them, you're just slotting them at the bottom and,
Well,
that make sense?
yeah, and a compensation study is just that, it's a study. It's not that we have to implement it, right?
I'm just trying to look at the bigger picture of making sure that, my department heads are getting treated, obviously as fairly as the people underneath, and try, what does that fairness look like, and trying to have that conversation.
Then, you know what, for our next meeting, could you do like a 15-year draft of,
Yeah.
actual dollars? Actual dollars,
Yep.
and we can see where that spread is, so.
Yeah.
I mean, it's,
No,
it's going.
I was gonna say, and I know you're right, because that's how
And it
compounding
every year.
interest works on, like, yeah, that's,
I've argued that every year.
that's why they tell us to save into a retirement account, because it compounds on itself year after year after year. So I'm not doubting your argument, I'm just trying to look at a larger picture, and, because a lot of people do it the same way we're doing it, and so are we putting ourselves at a competitive disadvantage then by doing it differently?
Well, I don't wanna see any of you leave, but if, I answer to the taxpayers of New Prague.
Yeah.
So whether Waconia, they can call their councilman and either complain or say whatever. I don't wanna see any of you guys leave, but if you got an opportunity to go somewhere else because they're gonna pay 10,000, we have lost a couple people there. But we really haven't missed a beat. I'm not saying I want mass walkouts or anything else. I wanna be fair to you guys, and I think we are. But I wanna be fair to everybody, whether they're on the bottom third or the top third.
And
That's what I'm trying to get.
I certainly understand that.
Okay.
I would say we've certainly been lucky since I've been here in being able to replace people that have left with high-quality people. But at some point too, when you're getting constant turnover, and we have hit some people that aren't quite as good, that we've seen a lot more turnover in a couple positions because we had dud after dud after dud after dud. I mean, that does wear on the other people in the department too. And it creates a subpar product then of the services we're providing. And so suddenly we'll say the $50,000 wage isn't giving the $50,000 product we were getting 2 employees ago because we now can't fill that.
Sure.
And so I think like there is that element to it as well.
I got a quick one, you said something about social security, they do it on goods and service, but is it a certain percentage?
Yeah, and it's the same percentage across everybody.
Well, why couldn't we implement something like that instead of going through this every year?
Well, that's what we're talking about with
That's what
COLA.
we're doing.
We actually usually do just a base percentage and everybody gets the same percentage.
Right, but it's based on what you make.
Well, yeah.
And it's same with social security. Obviously, if you have more social security money coming, 2.7% increase, my 2.7% may be higher than someone else because of my wage history. And how, and that's how it works, and that's how we do it. What Sean's saying is that the cost of living is no different for me than it is for Meg or for you.
So yes, we
I
have
mean, I pay, my goods and services I pay for are the same that you pay for. It's just, it's less of my income because I get more money from social security cost of living because based on my wage history.
Yeah, generally we do it the same way Social Security does it, or
Right.
have thus far.
But I guess we could have the discussion all night, but I think what we need to, I'm in agreement of keeping the 4% in the budget for now and that stuff, and then hopefully the compensation study comes out, you know, and will kind of give us a picture of where we sit at.
And that
And where that would
compensation,
be.
yeah, that compensation study will then really guide us outside of this COLA.
Right. You know, and if we get everyone, whatever it is, and put them into that compensation study, it may be 3.9%, or it could be 4.2%. But now we got everyone at a level that is consistent with other communities or the marketplace or whatever that is. But for budget purposes, I would agree that we should keep it at.
Agree.
I think keeping it in budget's fine, and I'll just throw out this comment that I've said before. I've just, coming from a private sector background, I just have a challenge with this whole schedule idea. So I have more of a problem, not a problem, but a difference of opinion as far as the step issue, because you look at our cost of compensation, it's significantly higher than the cost of inflation when you look at the schedule and what it does for us when you add the steps and the cost of living increase. So where I have a personal challenge with it is really when you get past the 11 years, and I would rather see the steps lowered and the schedule increased, so the longer term employees that don't get steps anymore, fairer to them. But the whole rationale behind steps I've just really never fully understood. So, but that's a topic we can talk about with the
Outstanding.
Okay, so what else?
Next, equipment studies and facility funds. I know you had mentioned it, Bruce, that the equipment study has an additional 25,000 into it budgeted right now that would not be spent this year. And then even looking at the facilities stuff, we're having $100,000 in the government buildings fund. And I know I actually wanted to make this comment and I realized it was coming, so I was trying to keep us on track when you mentioned about potentially flattening that curve. This is one area that I see that would help us flatten that curve. By leaving those numbers in there this year, we can then look at addressing it next year. And it makes that smaller step. So,
well, my reaction is, I have no problem if we use the 100,000 and put into a debt service number.
yeah.
But if you keep in the government building, then it's not earmarked for.
Well, then I think that's certainly something, it's because, I mean, we have that city hall fund, and I think there's a city hall maintenance fund and a city hall, or just facilities fund. I very much see that. I would say if you're looking at potentially moving that, saying, hey, we'll just leave that in there, and we'll just earmark into moving that into the debt service funds at the end of the year, instead of moving it into that future facilities earmark. Does that make sense?
I would support that, and it's not only for the spike, but when we look at fire truck and payloaders. Wasn't a payloader, but there's a big number coming up besides that to try to get ready for it.
But I mean, some of that stuff, we also are, we're never a zero budget. And I think most of the time we have, our revenues exceed our expenditures.
Staff has done very well at keeping our expenses.
Right, but I'm just saying, so like last year on the income statement, and Robin and I were kind of talking that, but I mean, it was 459,000 in favor. Our revenue was higher than our expenses on the income statement.
Right.
So obviously, you got money you put around into the different funds already.
I'm not sure where they were assigned last year, but,
Right.
or if they were assigned, but yes.
Right, and I think some 100,000 of it was assigned to this building fund. But I don't know where the remaining went. You know what I'm saying? So next year, I think right now, through July, we have 171,000 that our revenue is higher than our expenses. So You know, at that trend, it could be another $400,000. Now, okay, if the 100,000 is built into the number, what does the other 300,000 go? You know, I mean, are we just building reserves for the sake of building reserves over time?
And I don't think that's necessarily the case. I mean, I know, some of those, I guess, reserves for the sake of reserves are what allowed us to buy a parks building for cash. That we've been able to build those up, and when that opportunity came, instead of having to build a $4 million building, we bought a $1 million.
Well, yeah, and I think we did that with the road over by the golf course too, way back when. And we paid cash for that, our portion of it.
No, I totally get your point. That's what
But-
has been done over the years, that
Right, and I get it, it's
Cash
being
is built
used, but
up.
I'm just saying in the, you know, if the budget was always zero, then you would have this stuff in there, but we always seem to be,
I would hate to plan that we're going to underspend our budget, because that's the year that you don't.
no, I'm just saying that and I'm not saying to change the budget, but I'm just saying there's money going into these different funds already, you know. So, I mean, it's not like we're not putting money aside.
right,
That's all I'm trying to say.
right, but I think in the last couple of years, and this is just a feeling, I think we did start to spend down some savings. So
Yeah,
I
or
think,
we're
I
gonna
think
use
we
some on the food
tried to
station, I think
acknowledge that there's,
400,000,
yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna use 400,000 on that, so we don't have to bond.
Shouldn't we just find where our comfort level is, so we don't have all this extra money sitting around and actually use it some years, like the EDA, instead of 75, it's 50. I pushed for it last year, whatever, just to pull some of that money out, to actually lower that levy and lower the property
Right,
taxes.
and I think,
And to Bruce's point, I'm all for trying to balance it out and plan for it, so we have it, but I don't wanna give the taxpayer some false notion that, you know, our levy's only 7% this year, 6.65% instead of the 12 to 14, because that money is gonna start coming out, and we don't know what is around the corner.
Right.
Where we could've used that for something else, and then it seems like, oh, well,
and I think that's something that we have a discretion at the end of the year. We know what that number is. Say, okay, we're putting 100,000 here, 100,000 in the police station fund to pay down, you know what I mean? And, you know, direct that to where we want it to go, rather than just, let's leave it in this reserve, and this, and that. Oh, we got money, now we can buy the park board building, you know, or whatever. You know, the next couple years, I think we have to be more, whatever our excess money is, it's directed to soften the blow.
right, but what's the comfort level of having these 400,000, or even the ambulance fund, we use 600,000 of that for the community center. I mean, should that have ever been at 600,000, you know, I mean, it turned out that, yeah, it was great to help lower that down, but, I mean, where's the right level? When we're charging 6 point, then we're looking to trim that to 4.2, or whatever it is.
Right.
And we can get there.
And I think, I mean, you're right that conversation needs to be had, because there are certain things that we have been able to do because we have that money available. And obviously, it's easy to look at $1 billion and say, well, we just spend that now and it'll help us keep our levy low. But spending that reserve down on, I always caution against using a one-time revenue source against a reoccurring revenue, because the next year, that expense is still gonna be there and that one-time revenue source won't be there. I'm much more comfortable at saying, hey, we have this pot of money, we can now put it towards this project. If the pot grows back, great, we can put that towards another project, but it allows stuff to continue advancing without shocking a system and forcing you to have to really spike certain years. Because you're like, well, we don't have that revenue source to pay that down, because we didn't continue to put that money away yearly, and now we've got a fire truck coming up that's $500,000 that we now have to come up with a levy for or bond for, instead of paying the cash that we could have if we'd maintained that slight increase year over year into that fund. If that makes sense.
But like here, we got discretionary expenses, $70,929.
Yes, so that's the one.
And to me,
Yep.
anytime, as an auditor, anytime that's discretionary or miscellaneous, throws a red flag.
Yep, do you remember, Chuck, that was normally $25,000 year over year. And that was some money we put in there for the whole purpose of the comp study again, not knowing if in theory, if the comp study rolls back and we've got enough funds hanging out and all the salaries and stuff, I would take that discretionary back down to 25. I mean, that'd be a $50,000 savings right there.
Yeah, it'd be 1%.
But yeah, that's in there right now for that
Right.
whole purpose of not knowing where that comp study is gonna go.
It almost seems like we should put all the paperwork away and meet in the end of October and talk about the budget once we have the comp study.
Well,
Everything's revolving
but
around
we have
the
to
comp
come up
study.
with that number for the
Preliminary.
Department of Revenue.
We just pick a number.
Right, well, that's what I mean.
They prefer,
We could pick that 6.98% number that was presented on the initial budget. Say, here, it will not get higher than that. We know that. That's a,
Um,
we know we've already saved money already.
Mm-hmm.
2% just on the park board.
What you were saying before, Josh, I agree with as far as being careful about the, using the overages on your budget. But at times, over the years, I wondered, when we have these overages that are sometimes substantial, it may be because we were overly conservative in our budget and we over levied. So sometimes you look at that number at the end of the year and you say, gosh, we're pulling our hair out to try to find $20,000 savings in the levy, and then we over levied so much anyway. And
Is in this
that's the
budget,
balance I would be wanting to be careful of this. And we won't have this issue so much in the future, but in the past, we were just being rightful about conservatively budgeting on what we're making on interest, but then it's a significant number and we have the cash. That's levies that we could have saved maybe as a percentage of levy increase. That's the other side of it that I just want to be mindful of.
So what, is there a number that we know of that you have built in there for the contingencies? That if we just did the budget and we had an overage of 500,000, that 300,000 was already buried in, that's gonna be moved?
So at this point, working with the departments, we have not necessarily buried any money, like I'd say.
Well, you got the 100,000 in there.
Well, yeah, so,
That's what I'm saying,
Okay,
100,000,
okay.
you got
planned,
70,000,
planned
yeah,
overages.
what you have planned in the budget right now.
yes, so,
So that if we followed the budget and we ended up with an excess of 500,000, how much was planned?
okay, yep, so I understand your question. So the equipment fund has a planned overage of 25,000. And the reason that's there is because a few years ago, we decided, hey, we're gonna keep levying for $1 million, between debt service and the equipment fund. Well, this is the first year that the equipment will be less than that, so that's got a planned $25,000 overage. We have the planned $100,000 in there, so it's 125,000. The only other planned overage in there is the contingency above 25,000.
So you basically got 200,000 of planned.
Well, yeah, so I guess the contingency, the whole thing in theory, if you didn't use any of the contingency, so yes.
So you got
The budget as it
200,000
stands is
sitting there,
planned
so
200,000.
at the end of the year, let's say we have 500,000 and our revenues did better or we over billed.
And-
You know what I'm saying?
And
Of
it's-
300,000.
oh, absolutely.
And admittedly, some of those become, we are doing a comp study, and we did some real preliminary numbers of what this, or not comp study, comprehensive plan. We did some real preliminary numbers at this comprehensive plan, or, I don't remember what those numbers were. The zoning code, I remember. Real preliminary numbers, the zoning code would cost us about $80,000. So we planned we levied $40,000 one year with the plan of doing it $40,000 the next year and doing it all and having our $80,000 the next year. Well, our bids came back, and I think they came back at 80,000, 78, and 52. And so somebody just really undercut our bids, and I would have hated to plan for that, and that bid have not come. So some of those, or we have a truck that comes in, instead of 225, it comes in at 200. And so some of those,
And
yeah.
you're not gonna know that, but I'm just saying, I mean, built in this budget right now that you have in front of us, there's roughly 200,000.
Of unspent.
Yes,
Yes.
of money that is not directly being utilized during 2026.
Correct.
And a good example is, well, Bruce made a great point about over levying. That's taxpayer money that should go back to them. We just saw the state, and I'm not saying this council would do it, but we don't know what the next council will do. When people see cash and they have cash in different funds, they wanna spend it, right? See it on the golf board. They got cash in their checking account, they're cash flowing this thing. I can listen around the table and have them, oh geez, let's repave this and repave that and whatever else. They wanna send it on their little pet project. Park board kind of maybe the same way when they see that money that's sitting there. So thank you, Maggie, for pointing that out. Maybe trying to pull some of that back. EDA, same way. Yeah, if there's a goal in mind that they need 600,000, I know they don't have it now, but when they did, they come up with ways to spend it. And then it's easier to do stuff like not force the police station to skinny it down, you know, or whatever else. Build a $6 million.
That's different, that's an enterprise.
It doesn't matter, it's taxpayer money that's sitting there that they've earned, but it's, how about they pay us back the $162,000 that I paid for the first 6 years and now we're whittling it down? That was coming out of the taxpayers' money. So that's why I'm saying we need to find where our comfort level is, and then whatever's left, if it's 250,000 across these funds that we have as our rainy day fund, and we need it because we don't know if the roof's gonna leak tomorrow. But I can go out and sell the fact that if we have a spike one year, I can go out and say, hey, listen, we didn't do all this work, we kept your levy low for 5 years, and now it's just one time because of this, and it doesn't dampen anything and flatten the curve and whatnot, cause I think that's almost a little dishonest. We're holding taxpayer money, we should have some reserve rainy day fund, but if we have overages, it needs to go back to the taxpayer, and the only way we can give it back to the taxpayer is in that levy.
I guess,
And
yeah.
lowering it.
I guess in my experience though, people tend to forget very quickly, like what we had, or that we went backwards, or that you didn't do something the year before. I mean, I even take, was it 2 years ago when we had that 10% spike, but if you couple it with the year, we did that because we had the zero before, well, everyone seemed to forget that we'd done zero before, and all the talking point was just 10%. It wasn't that, well, over 2 years, it was 5%. I go back to even conversations we had as a council 3 years ago when we got a health insurance quote that dropped our health insurance rates by 17%. I think it was 17. I think the next year we had an 8%, and there were comments that came out of, we can't do this anymore. Like, we can't do health insurance 8% increase. Well, it was still lower than it had been previously, and it actually took 2 years or 3 years to get us back to zero, because we all seem to operate with short-term memories about the previous year. And so it's really easy here to sit here and say now, hey, if we keep the levy low for 4 years and then need to spike it 17% for this, if I'm sitting in this chair, I see it coming down the pipe that 4 years from now, people are gonna be screaming at me that it's going up 17%, forgetting that we kept it hyper low for 3 years, or even taking it backwards 1 year.
Well, then again, it goes back to where we're sitting on it, but if we don't wanna over levy, we need to come up with an idea that where our comfort level is. Maybe it is $500,000 or whatever, I don't know. But, or I'll just use the state of Minnesota, they had $17 billion, they over levied, they spent it all.
I would agree that that
Because
was done
people
very
do
poorly.
that, when they see that number, all the little pet projects come out, whether it's golf course or parks or whatever, and I'm not saying it doesn't add to the quality of life, to a certain point, but there's a lot of people that don't want some of those things. There's only, you know, how many people are actual members at the golf course that have a New Prague address? Half? I don't know, you know, 130, 160? I mean, but there's 8,000 people around here.
I mean, but,
You know, I'm just saying, and I like the golf course, I don't read in too much of it. What I'm saying is, I don't like having a lot of cash laying around because, and I think this council's pretty conservative, and I don't see them throwing money at splash pads and whatever else all the time without some serious thought, but it can very easily happen, and
So I mean, that's a lot of my hope around this visioning document, is that we see stuff necessarily coming down the pipe, or we think that, hey, this is a good idea, it's not a good idea, and nix it off. Caution on the golf course, they are, in theory, a business operating, and if we remove their levy, it's under 17 right there, we can take off if you want to. They're, in theory, if they were sitting flush on $4 million cash and they'd been able to do that themselves, I would highly caution on pulling on that. Upgrade the golf course because they're making all, but if we're giving them money, then yes, you'd be much more prudent on that. I'm just a big.
What's the right level? Do we, because like I said, the more they see, the more plans they come up with. And
Well, I mean, if you were a business and you were making money hand over fist, you are going to plan to upgrade and try to grow that levy. Every business
Absolutely,
does
at
it.
one point you do need that, yeah.
And I don't know how long the city has operated the golf course for. If there comes a day where a private owner is now operating the golf course, they're gonna do that hand over fist. And so I would argue I would certainly have much more prudence over how it's being spent if the city and when the city was giving them $121,000 a year. But if they're making their own money, then I'm not saying go out and just Taj Mahal everything, but you would then, as a business that is flourishing, hope that you would try to build your coffers and create a better product and bring more people in. But all of that digresses to the point I was going to try to make of, this is why, and I know sometimes it feels like we make plans to sit on the shelf forever and never look at them again. I'm a huge fan of coming up with strategic plans. What direction does the city council want to do as an organization? Comprehensive plan, what sort of things do the citizens want to see in the city? That way, when you can say, we got a $1.5 million sitting here, what are we doing with that? And to have 1.5 million just sitting there with no plan, I think is terrible planning. It'd be no different than I'm sitting at my house looking at my own personal budget, and if I've got $1,000 sitting there and I don't know what I'm even gonna do with it, I would hope that I would say, okay, am I gonna redirect that into my rainy day fund? Am I putting it in the vacation fund? Like, how is this $1,000 gonna get used? And I think a city as an organization should do the same thing. And so every dollar you have sitting in the reserves is either supporting the fact that we need to have 50% fund balance for spending next year, or is going towards this project so that you guys, when someone comes to you, can say, yeah, there is $1 million sitting right there, but we have it sitting there knowing that at some point our city hall is gonna fall apart, we need to replace the roof and all this other stuff, and we think it may cost that much money. So I 100% agree with you that we should come up with that level, and I would say take it even farther so that we know what we have. We are planning to use that money so that way it can be spoken to eloquently and not just, I don't know, reserves.
No, well, I'd like to get the council's feeling on the 17,000 for the golf course. I mean, what is their cash, where they're sitting at in their checking account? I haven't seen the numbers recently, but
I don't know what their numbers off the top of my
it's
head.
over 100,000.
Oh, yeah.
So why are we giving them 17 more? Matter of fact, maybe we should, whatever it is, take half of it and pump it into a new Ford 150 or whatever that we need. It is our money. I mean, it is,
Well,
Yes, but again, that comment would go back to questioning, if they have made $100,000 as a business, running their business, I would.
it's our
Question.
business though.
It is our.
It's like you using that with the wastewater plant, I mean, if we got all this money sitting there, I get it, it's for the upgrades and whatnot, but that might be 8 years from now, might be 10 years from now. We might need some of that money right now to help flatten the curve.
Yes, but then are we planning on paying that business back?
But it is, well, and then Chuck says, well, they make interest on it. Well, they don't make anything. The taxpayer makes interest on it. That's taxpayer money. It goes into the little fund,
Well,
but
see, and that's where I'm arguing the golf course is not taxpayer money. But like, yes, the city owns the business, but if we were to take away the $17,000, there are no taxes going into that. That is operated completely off of revenues made by the golf course.
Right, but for 10 years, we pulled out hundreds of thousands of dollars to repave the parking lot, put new carpet in there, new furniture upstairs. I mean, that all came out of the taxpayers' money, and it isn't,
But I don't know how much money the golf course gave the city before. They were giving them 10,000 a year,
Right.
Yeah.
and I don't know how many years that has been. I mean, I don't think it's flush, but you'd have to put that into consideration too.
Oh, absolutely.
And look and say, hey, for 30 years, we gave you $10,000 a year.
Well, I know for two, I gave them at least 162, so if it was 10 a year for 30 years.
Well, whatever it is, I don't know, and who
And we've
knows
still
if,
been given for
who
8 more
knows
after.
beforehand too, there was
Yeah.
a lot of transactions done that the golf course gave the city money.
Sure.
I
And they
agree,
should.
I agree and disagree with a lot of what's being said, but my thinking and goal for many years is hopefully to get the golf course in a position to cash flow itself. And then to get to a point where it has luckily, and because of the management, been able to develop cash excess to avoid us having to finance it like we used to.
Right.
People forget that when we had to wash away $500,000
Yes.
debt that they had, and so there has been a lot of money stuck into it over the years. And at one point in time, the golf course did pay the city. It was a nominal amount of money, but back then it was material, I
Yeah, it
guess.
was probably, percentage wise, it was probably a pretty good percentage.
But to me, and in some way, I do think it's the taxpayer money because the taxpayer owns that facility. They own it, and it's not being tax levy any more if we don't pay the 17,000. But it is still the taxpayer's operation. They own the business and that type of thing. But to me, I'd rather not take money away from them because I'd rather have them build as healthy of a balance because we've been very fortunate to have good, decent weather over the last 3 or 4 years. And in some ways, COVID did a blessing to the golf course and turned it around for us. So we're in such a better financial position than we were in the past. I'd rather see cash build there so we don't have to do a line of credit like we used to have to do for that.
To what level though? I mean, that's, again, we go back to the level that we're.
Well, that's a good point. The facility needs, I think, and the future, there's significant amount of, if we ever talk about redoing the clubhouse, it's gonna be a lot of money. It's not gonna happen when I'm here anymore, but somehow there's improvements to the golf course that have to take place that are pretty significant. Am I right on that, Chuck? Do you have the assessment of the clubhouse? Is that?
I mean, that's kind of the assessment that I've gotten. Even, I think the clubhouse might have been included in our facility study, just on kind of what they thought.
It really,
Maintenance needs.
another 15 years.
And, I mean, I've even internally made a joke, maybe I just need to make a clubhouse city hall and do those two things together over there.
Yeah.
But, that's another project for another day.
So for them to build cash and use it, earmark it for future improvements is not a bad thing either. in my
Well,
mind.
that you said if they were 17,000 over, would the city get it
No, so if they were 17,000 over, it would go into their fund.
into their fund? So if they're 17,000 over, do we get it?
But just to the point that they needed our help at one point, and we might need their help at one point to help lower or to smooth out the increase.
And yeah, I mean, there may come a day when they're healthy enough that we have to look to them and say, hey, can we get some help here? And I don't think that they're close to that
No,
yet.
not even close.
Because, yeah, to that point, you have one rainy summer, that eats up their whole reserve. Grass grows, but nobody plays on it.
Can I give an idea out of the, in line with the conversation? Sorry about my voice, I'll try to speak as clearly as possible. So when we were talking about the funds set aside for the buildings, like City Hall replacement and where the money came from for parks, what if on that same document, the money for the golf course was set aside in one of those reserved accounts so that if the golf course needed it, it was there, but it wasn't just sitting in their revenue. To your point of like, oh, if you see it, you spend it.
Right.
That we would still allocate in this current year budget, or next year's budget, whatever. This is the amount that we're going to set aside if the golf course needs it, and then at a point in time, say
Move
they
it
haven't
into-
needed it, or, yeah.
Then allow them to use it.
Right. So it wouldn't help in the budget that we're working on right now, but it wouldn't give them the straight revenue unless they needed it.
I mean, but you wouldn't touch their revenue that
Correct, it would just sit in that, like the building funds do,
the 17,000 you're talking about?
right?
That's like putting a Band-Aid on an artery. Really need it, they're gonna need more than 70,000. Fees and that stuff.
But that's where we just accumulate year over year, so like if they didn't.
But I
really need
thought
it in
this is the
26.
last year.
Right, that's what I'm saying, so then if they didn't use those 17, it would just sit in that account. And then in 2027, if 20,000 was levied for ease of numbers, and they didn't use it again, then they'd have 37 in that account.
Oh,
And could
I
just
don't-
keep building.
I don't know if I would just keep giving them money. If they're cash flowing, like a business, just let them cash flow.
Because eventually, doesn't that 17,000 drop off to zero?
Next
I mean,
year.
yeah, so our plan,
Yeah,
our
that was
plan
the
would have been
call.
like, this is the last year of levying, and so we would just be in theory dropping off a year early.
It was just an idea when we talk about if there
Right,
need to be
but I-
remodels or.
Right, but I remember many times of sitting at the golf board meeting and having to tell them, because they'd go nuts on equipment and, well, golf carts and everything else, and we have a much bigger picture that we have to look at. Their narrow focus is the golf course. And park boards is just park boards, and, you know, there's a bigger picture to this, and it all comes back that we might need some of that money, and all I'm saying is that we pumped hundreds of thousands of dollars in it in the time I've been on this board, and now that they're sitting with money, and we're trying to either level out the tax increase, or we're trying to, or levy increase, or we're trying to reduce this one. I think it's time that we pull some of that money back.
So I think to that point, if that was something that we wanted to do, I'd wait till next year to do it. Only in that if you're trying to flatten that curve, that high spike's gonna be next. If you do that this year, now you're gonna get to next year and still have that spike, and now you're not gonna have that money or this money. And so, that, certainly a conversation we can have. I'm more against, unless they're super flush, but.
Well,
I
the
get the
17,000 isn't gonna make a big difference.
No, and then like, yeah,
If they're sitting on 180,000, maybe we take 100,000. We take off that 17 and we pump it back into the.
The numbers are so dramatic, though. We're talking about, in my mind, a cash surplus, they should have $500,000. You know, if you have two bad summers in a row, which I finance a number of golf courses, and that's not unusual. We've been very fortunate. You can go backwards very quickly in a golf course because of 4 months of weather that you depended upon. And when we were doing lines of credit from the city, I think we were doing up to 300,000 for the first half of the year. So for them to cash flow themselves, they would need a substantial amount of money. Or to take the financial risk away from the city, they should build up a substantial amount of money.
I'd be fine if they did that and then they were using it to buy their own equipment and.
They are, though.
everything,
They
and
are.
everything else.
Yeah, like, was it this year they used it decent, they bonded for a small amount, but yeah, they buy their own equipment.
They're paying the payments now.
Yeah, other than that small
Minus 17.
yeah, so obviously that if that 17 goes away, then they are completely kind of doing it all on
Right,
their
they're
own.
just like a separate, like a utility.
I'm very happy with where they're at compared to where they were, so.
No, I agree.
So I think just kind of keeping that conversation going, I know it was brought up real quickly about EDA, and whether 17 is right or it dropped to 15, I think it's kind of the same conversation. And I think it's certainly one we can continue to have. But I think as we set our preliminary, that we continue to have that conversation and we not be too necessarily slice that out right now. But that's certainly, like the equipment funds or whatnot, we can certainly do that. I did want to give you guys one quick update. We did get health insurance stuff back. I know we had worked into the budget, the cap, we've been told we had a 17% cap, and so that's what we worked into the budget. It came back at 16.9%. Really, it's 3 months, a year and a half ago that killed us. Like, we had pretty decent numbers other than those 3 months were real bad. So the IRS is also bumping up our deductible. So deductibles, right now, we're sitting on $3,300 and $6,600 of embedded. It would bump to $34 and $68, I believe. Correct, Robin? Is that right?
Yes.
I think so. I just had it pulled up.
$100.
So there would be a deductible increase as well that would forced from the IRS on us, assuming we sit where we're at with insurance. And so there's no decision that necessarily needs to be made on that tonight. I just wanted to update you guys on that because we just got that information.
Is there a way, I know, with my wife at the school district, if we don't use her insurance, and I use mine, they, just for her to stay off of it, there's $1,000 or $1,500 or something.
We have never done that. That is something that, the council can do it if it wants.
No, I'm just saying maybe make that an offer, because right now we're at 99% of employees are on our insurance.
We'd have to look into the legality. I felt like it was under Obamacare that went away, that you couldn't offer a stipend any longer. I know there's still some places that do it, so I'd want to make sure that we were doing it obviously lawfully, where
Right.
previous to whatever law changed, it was very easy to just say, we'll give you this amount, we'll give you this amount, don't take health insurance. So I don't know what the workaround is, that some people do it, but there was a recent point that it wasn't allowable any longer because they wanted to encourage people to be on health care and not take the money.
Right.
And I wonder, I know, what was it, 8 years ago or whenever Trump first took office, I know a bunch of stuff changed. And so it's, we will look into it because, I would guess there are employees who are like, I would rather take that check and be on my spouse's.
We also do need a certain number of enrollment though, even though our rates are high. I guess to put it bluntly, it would probably be your single younger people that potentially could be like, oh, I'll take my parents' insurance or, and that would hurt our claims and our plans.
Well, just so we're checking it out, and that could very well be, I don't know, but I just had, I thought we were already in a pool.
Yeah, we're in a much
But we're
larger
still
pool.
one member of that pool, like they're still quoting us
Right.
for us specifically.
But if we had 10% drop off, 5%, even if it was the younger ones or something, that'd be substantial savings, because it,
We'll look into it, because that's, if that's something the council's open to, people do it for a reason. So,
right,
yeah.
no, it benefits the some families, they fall into a certain narrow wedge, but
Yeah, we'll look at
5
that.
people would be huge.
So I guess all that rolls just down to, where the council wants to set a preliminary levy. And I guess my thought would be if we end up having some agreement tonight on where that levy is gonna sit, we'll bring that back at the second meeting in September to approve. And we probably wouldn't have any budget meetings until after that.
Looking for a dollar number or a percentage or?
Either one. So I know in here, I was basing it off of a little bit, almost 1% above what the budget is currently sitting at, which is why I put the $5,735,000 is about 1% above where it's currently sitting. But there was talk of setting it right where it's currently at with the budget, knowing that we have that potential stuff coming out, or if you want to see something higher or lower. However you're comfortable in giving me that information, we can certainly turn that into what we need, whether it's a percentage or a number.
Anything gonna blow up from now to the end of the year?
Well, my crystal ball is in the shop right now, but I don't believe so.
I think the biggest unknown is the comp study.
Right.
That we really have no idea. So I would be more conservative. So we have to do the Department of Revenue. If we know that we get 200,000, or we know that we already saved, if we took the golf course and that stuff off.
I know we said this early about the comp study, and Maggie alluded to it too. And I made the comment, are we gonna get this done, and are we really shooting for the budget cycle or not? I didn't like the idea that we're gonna try to make this decision or look at the study right before budget time period. I thought the timing was trying to shoehorn something in there. So I just wanna make the comment, we don't have to feel like we have to take action the particular day or time we're getting into this budget. We can make allowances for it and decide to start or make a change anytime we want to. It doesn't have to be this year, it doesn't have to be the start of the year, it could be a mid-year, we can certainly provide allowances to it, so. What I really don't want to happen is that we get information at the end of October. We feel compelled to try to force ourselves to make a decision, which is a very important decision in a short period of time where people are either may not be here or gone. It's not doing the employees or the city any favors by having to force us into something. Just trying to piggyback your
Yeah.
comment there is that the timing is set up like we're doing, making this big budget decision, but I want to be considerate or consider that we don't have to make it in that time frame.
So with that said, are you comfortable where, was it 6.98% levy that's in the current, what we're looking at here today? We set that as a preliminary, knowing that we are going to shave dollars off.
Me?
Everyone?
Question for the group, it sounds
I like a round number, like 6.75 or something, but 6.98 seems kind of strange.
It's like grocery store pricing. The groceries are $6.99 instead of $7.
I think 7% is a good number.
Yeah, I don't care.
Cause we know it's not
For shaving
gonna
it
end
more.
there.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Right, that Patrick? It's not gonna end there.
Doesn't matter.
The headline.
Next Friday I'll hear it from somebody.
Okay. Well, that's where it's at. We will set that at 7 and bring that resolution back. Like I said, second meeting in,
Or do you wanna do it at the first
I
one?
mean, we could do,
since we have
if you wanna see it first when we get done too, just get it over with.
Are we worn out, or can I ask a couple other questions on that?
Can we just find that out first? Do they want it September 2nd or?
Which meeting, normally we do it the second meeting in September, but if we have it, we can certainly bring it the first meeting if the council would rather see it in the first meeting, just have it over with.
I'm okay with the first meeting.
Yeah, let's do first meeting.
Okay.
Why wouldn't we look at it in case we have questions and do it at the second if it's not?
Well, I can
Or you
bring,
can
I
have
can bring
another
the first
budget
one if you guys, if I can bring the resolution at the first one. If you guys have a question,
Yeah.
we can push it back to the second meeting. How about that? Because then it means, it's no different than tabling a resolution up there. 'Cause
I mean, we're giving you a preliminary right now at 7.
Yep.
And then you're gonna be doing some work. You're not just gonna come back with the 7%, right? You're.
Well, so for the preliminary, it would be a one-page resolution.
It's just a
that-
resolution.
Yeah.
That has to go to
I'm
the
sorry.
Minnesota
I'm
Department of
sorry.
Revenue.
Yeah, this is just the resolution we send up to the state.
And then we'll start having some deep down, October.
Doing it at the first one just gives my office the couple extra days to get things to the county and the state versus the
Yep.
last
No,
one.
that makes sense. I'm
Yep,
sorry.
first
That's okay.
meeting, 7%.
Okay, so we'll bring it the first meeting at 7%. Okay, what else you got, Bruce?
I guess I just found an answer to one of the questions myself. Good for me. But,
Pat yourself on the back.
yeah, finally. But I just want a police question here. Just an understanding, and it's just trying to go back to my memory here about overtime. I had thought that when we added the position a couple of years ago, that would reduce overtime. I think it's been 2 or 3 years we added it. It wasn't, we didn't hire the position right away. It took a while, but.
Excuse me, the additional officers you're talking about?
Yeah.
What
so-
number are you looking at?
Well, I'm just looking at I'm looking at page 14.
Why there's overtime in there, I'm assuming.
Not that why there's overtime, the amount of overtime, because we're running at a pace now.
What page is it?
It's actually on page 13. but- And maybe it has gone down already from previous years. I just don't remember.
So I will say, if you look back, I mean, it does look like in fiscal year 24, you paid 83,000, and this year we budgeted 60. And next year we're budgeting 65, so there is a decrease there. I do know there's some of those times, and you can't escape the overtime. If you happen to have 1 or 2 officers out, and other people on vacation, you're slipping in, overtime overtime that just ends up happening sometimes. I think there's other times where it's gonna land in that overtime that we're getting reimbursed, correct? So I think like Dozinki, for example, I think is all overtime work on the city's perspective, but we get reimbursed for some of that, right? Or other potential stuff that we're working
Prior
on.
Lake,
Yep.
Prior Lake Lake.
Yeah,
Oh,
and like the TZD grant.
So maybe that answers the question. We're on a pace now with the 45,600 year to date, or through the end of July rather. A pace of 78,000 for the year, which is be 18,000 over budget for the year. So maybe that's a timing issue and it'll self-correct itself by the end of the
I
year.
think that's what I was
From now
gonna
until the end of
say.
the year, we won't be going at that pace. Because your budget is 65.
Right. That's what I was gonna say, and you caught it before I even said it.
So, but I guess it's gone down from 83 to 65, so that is the new officer position has probably created the decrease.
Right.
That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah. Exactly.
So is the overtime almost a regularly scheduled issue? So do we have overtime built into our schedule?
Not necessarily. So when you think about like certain trainings, like we're required to do certain trainings, right? So what we've done is we've kind of, with our two teams and the two officers, we've been able to align them to do their trainings together. Instead, so people that are working can,
Right.
you know, so in some of the trainings that are required are only offered a certain time that we have to go. And so that has to be at an overtime rate because they're not working that day.
Okay.
And then to try and take an officer from this team and move them over to this team in the middle of the week, it doesn't work. Am I making sense with that? So if you take a guy who's off for these 2 days and now you have him come in, and now you're working on another one, his hours are going to be over for that pay period.
Because you need them to be together.
Correct.
So there is, structurally, you're always gonna have overtime.
Yes.
Even if you had 2 more officers, you'd still have overtime.
I would have to imagine, Tim, if we hit a point where we had like 30 officers, then you would have all kinds of flexibility for trainings and whatnot.
Yeah, when you got to that point, and there's always vacations and sick and somebody gets hurt.
Court time and all that
Court
stuff,
time,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
It is, uncontrollable, and we're not alone in the conversations with the attorney's office about the court time and the cancellations, and it's awful. Like we get notified 3 hours before the court date that it's canceled. Well, we still have to pay them because they've planned for this in daycares and families and things. So yes, that is going to happen. We worked really hard to minimize that. And with our extra officers now, we're able to say, okay, now we have an extra person here, and when we're full, the person that's working until 6 o'clock can now take this call. So the person at 2 is not taking this call, so they can leave, right? So we do those things strategically within the police department, so that doesn't happen as frequently as it did.
Well, thanks. The 45,634 just stuck out to me because we're way over budget. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, anything else regarding the budget? Okay, I guess I'll make a motion to close or
Second?
adjourn the budget meeting.
I'll second.
By Maggie Bass. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, thank you, everyone. Now we're gonna do the Josh closed meeting.